if attention is our superpower, at the moment we are surrounded by kryptonite. I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley interviewing the people who designed key aspects of the world in which we now live. And the thing that most struck me about them was how sick with guilt they feel about what they've done. There's so many reasons we need to fight to reclaim our attention. We need to do it for ourselves, for our work, for our children, and for our democracies. You can try having self-control, but every time you do, there are 10,000 engineers on the other side of the screen undermining your self-control. Your attention did not collapse. Your attention has been stolen from you.
Your work has been so inspiring for us at Opal, and all the community of people who are using the app, I think, will be fascinated to hear about your latest book, Stolen Focus, translated today in French. On vous vole votre attention, and we're going to talk about why it's so hard to stay focused and what we can do to change that. In Stolen Focus, you talk about the attention crisis, and you say that this attention crisis isn't necessarily an individual problem. It's more of a collective issue.
Sustained focus and attention are at the heart of all human achievement. This is our superpower as a species. And the evidence is very clear. When your ability to focus and pay attention deteriorates, your ability to achieve your goals deteriorates, your ability to solve your problems deteriorates. You feel worse about yourself because you actually are less competent when you can't pay attention. So if attention is our superpower, at the moment we are surrounded by kryptonite. We're in a huge crisis of focus and attention. The average office worker in France now focuses for less than 1 minute. And for every one child who was identified with serious attention problems when I was 7 years old, there's now 100 children who've got that problem. And this is not happening because you failed or I failed, right? The reason I wrote the book is I could feel my own attention was getting worse. With each year that passed, things that require deep focus that are so important to me, like reading books, having proper long conversations, even watching films, was just getting harder and harder. It's getting more and more like kind of running up a down escalator, you know what I mean? But the key thing to understand is your attention did not collapse. Your attention has been stolen from you. There are 12 factors that are undermining our attention and focus that I learned about interviewing over 250 of the leading experts in attention all over the world. Those factors weren't invented by you. They weren't invented by me. They weren't invented by our kids, right? They are big social factors. But once you understand what they are, we can begin to defend ourselves and our kids as individuals, and then we can begin to take on those forces as a society.
You talk about how tech companies have designed the technology we use in a way that keeps us hooked. Do you mind talking a little bit about this and how that discovery happens for you?
I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley interviewing the people who designed key aspects of the world in which we now live. And the thing that most struck me about them was how sick with guilt they feel about what they've done. For example, there's a great guy called James Williams who worked at the heart of Google. And one day he was speaking at a tech conference where the audience was literally the people who designed the stuff that you use today and people with kids, your kids are using right now. And he said to this audience, if there's anyone here who wants to live in the world that we're creating, please put up your hand. And nobody put up their hand. And he was like, I'm done, I'm out of here. And he quit and became a really important philosopher of attention. People in Silicon Valley kept explaining to me the key mechanism by which these apps are undermining our attention. And it took me quite a long time to understand it, even though it's not that complicated. They explained to me, if you open now TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of the mainstream social media apps, and you begin to scroll, these companies begin to make money out of you in 2 ways straight away. The first way is really obvious. You see advertising. Okay, you don't need me to explain that to you. The second way is much more important. Everything you ever do on these apps, including in your so-called private messages, is scanned and sorted by their artificial intelligence algorithms to figure out who you are and what makes you tick. What makes you happy, what makes you angry, what makes you horny, what makes you sad. And they're learning that information for lots of reasons, but the most important is they're figuring out what to show you next to keep you scrolling. Because every time you open the app and begin to scroll, they begin to make money because you see ads. The longer you scroll, the more money they make because the more ads you see. Every time you or your child close the app, that's a disaster. Their revenue stream disappears. So all of this genius in Silicon Valley, this AI, all these algorithms, when it's applied to social media, is designed to do one thing and one thing only, to figure out how do we get you to open the app as often as possible and scroll as long as possible. That's it. As my friend Tristan Harris said when he testified before the Senate, you can try having self-control, but every time you do, there are 10,000 engineers on the other side of the screen undermining your self-control. And when I was learning this, I kept thinking, it can't be that simple. But as my friend Asa Raskin, who also worked at the Heartless Machine, said to me, the head of KFC may be a perfectly nice person, but all she cares about in her professional capacity is how often did you go to KFC this week and how big was the bucket you bought. That's it. That's all she cares about. And if you become obese and get diabetes, that's not her problem. In the same way, we are all being exposed to machinery that is designed to frack and invade our attention. But the key thing to understand is it doesn't have to work this way. As James Williams said to me, human beings had axes for 1.2 million years before anyone said, guys, shall we put a handle on this axe? The entire internet has existed for less than 10,000 days. If we come together, we can fix these forces that are doing this to us.
And so, speaking of fixing these issues, what do you think are the most important areas to look at? How do we start?
So for all of the 12 factors that are harming our attention that I write about in my book, Stolen Focus, there are two levels at which we've got to deal with them. I think of them as defense and offense. There are loads of things we can do immediately to defend ourselves and our children against the forces that are invading our attention. One great thing is to download your app. Everyone should do it now, right? I go through dozens of other defensive measures, but I want to be really honest with people because I don't feel most writers and intellectuals who are communicating about attention are leveling with people. I'm passionately in favor of these individual changes. I love your app. I've made these changes myself. They will really enrich your life. On their own, they will not fully solve this problem. Because the truth is, this didn't happen because you had bad habits or our kids had bad habits or I had bad habits. This happened because these very big and invasive forces. And at some point, we have to take on these forces collectively. I'll give you an example of something that happened in the history of France that I think can really help guide us now. When I was a kid, the only form of gasoline you could buy in this country, in Britain, in the entire world, was leaded petrol, right? And it was discovered by scientists that exposure to lead is really bad for people's brains and particularly bad for children's ability to pay attention. And if it was in the gasoline, it was in the fumes, it was in the air, everyone was breathing in enormous amounts of lead. So what happened was a group of ordinary mothers, what at the time were called housewives, here in France, banded together and said, why are we allowing this? Why are we allowing the lead industry to screw up our kids' brains? What they said is, let's get rid of the specific technology that's harming our kids' brains, the leaded petrol, and replace it with something that does the same job but doesn't harm our kids' brains, right? And these mothers fought like hell for their children. It's kind of forgotten now, but it was a really big fight. As a result, the average French child is 5 IQ points higher than they would have been had these mothers not fought like hell for us, right? Now, to me, that's a really important model to inspire us. In addition to all the individual changes that I advocate in my book that are hugely important, we also need to come together and take on the forces that are doing this to us. But it requires a shift in psychology. We need to stop being angry with ourselves and our children and start being angry with the forces that have done this to us, that have stolen our attention. We are the free citizens of democracies and we own our own minds. And together we can take them back if we want to.
There are some interesting movements that are happening in different parts of the world that are prompting this collective action. One thing I wanted to tell you about and show you is the little part that we actually try to play in this collective action. I have an interesting story there. Just last week, we had this big truck in New York City that had a sign on it, and that sign was inspired by, I think the US Surgeon General recently said...
Yeah, my friend Vivek Murthy, yeah.
Yeah, he recently said, we need warning labels on social media. So we're like, why not do it? So we had this truck that said scrolling kills.
Fantastic, I love this.
That went around New York City. We went around all of the major headquarters of tech companies at Google, at TikTok, at Snapchat. And we actually interviewed people in front of these offices, in front of that sign, that are working in these companies, trying to get their reactions. And by the way, I wanted to gift you the scrolling kill stickers.
I love it. I'm going to put it on the back of my phone immediately. Thank you, ironically. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. This is fantastic.
So obviously we have a lot of data coming from the US about screen time, about social media. All these companies come from the US. Do you think this is a US problem or do you think this is a global problem?
Oh, it's massively a global problem. I mean, one of the things that really interests me is my book has been published now in, I think, 56 countries, and everyone wants to ask the same questions because the underlying dynamics are playing out everywhere. And it's really important to think about, you know, our attention is being profoundly harmed at so many levels. So we can all feel it's being harmed at the level of just our ability to do basic things, right? Think about something as basic as you're in the middle of working, you want to go to the fridge to get a Coke Zero. You walk there, you get a text message, you forget why you're in the kitchen, you come back, right? You don't have your Coke Zero. So at the most trivial level and at the level of our democracies, right? Democracy is a form of collective attention and it is being profoundly harmed. You're seeing this all over the world. We're speaking just after the painful, from my point of view, re-election of Donald Trump in the United States, where I spend a lot of my time. So we're seeing this at every level. There's so many reasons we need to fight to reclaim our attention. We need to do it for ourselves, for our work, for our children, and for our democracies. While you're watching this video, you might get a text message, right? And you might just think, oh, I'll look at that text message. It'll take me 3 seconds to look at it and 3 seconds to reply, and I'll go back to watching the video. What's 6 seconds? It's nothing. A study by Professor Michael Posner at the University of Oregon discovered that if you're interrupted by something as simple as a text message, it takes you on average 23 minutes to get back to the level of focus you had before you were interrupted. But most of us never get 23 minutes without being interrupted. So we're constantly operating at this lower level of cognitive ability. We don't have to accept that. I'd felt my own attention was getting worse for years. And early on in the research for my book, I was very stuck in thinking about this as an individual problem. And I thought I knew what was going on. I thought, well, I know what's happened here. The smartphone came along and screwed me over, and I don't have the willpower to resist it. So I thought the answer is obvious. I'll use my willpower to get away from the smartphone. So I was in a very lucky position. An Oscar-nominated movie got made out of one of my books. So I thought, right, I'm out of here. And I went to a place called Provincetown in Cape Cod in the United States for 3 months with no smartphone and no laptop that could get onto the internet. And there were a lot of challenges, but the thing that blew my mind was how much my attention improved. Like, it was staggering. It went back to being as good as it had been when I was a teenager, right? Like, I could sit and read for like 8 hours a day. It was incredible. And I thought, well, why would I ever go back to how I was before? This is amazing. And I went back to Boston. I reclaimed my phone. And within 2 weeks, I was like 80% back to where I'd been. And I realized, digital detoxes are great. Anyone who can do them has the privilege of doing them, do it. It's like thinking, as my friend James Williams puts it, that the solution to air pollution is to wear a gas mask. Okay, if I lived in Beijing, I'd wear a gas mask, but that's not the long-term solution. The long-term solution is actually to do what you've done in Paris, to get cars out of the environment, to reduce the actual pollution. I went to MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, to interview one of the leading neuroscientists in the world, an amazing man named Professor Earl Miller. He said to me, look, there's one thing you need to understand about the human brain more than anything else. You can only consciously think about 1 or 2 things at a time. That's it. This is a fundamental limitation of the human brain. The human brain hasn't changed significantly in 40,000 years. You can only think about 1 or 2 things at a time. But what's happened is we've fallen for a kind of mass delusion. The average teenager now believes they can follow 6 or 7 forms of media at the same time. The rest of us are not that far behind them. So what happens is scientists like Professor Miller, and scientists all over the world, get people into labs and they get them to think they're doing more than one thing at a time. And what they discover is always the same. You can't do more than one thing at a time. What you do is you juggle very quickly between tasks. You're like, what did you just ask me? What is this message on my phone? What does it say on the TV over there? What is this message on Facebook? Wait, what did you just ask me again? And it turns out this juggling comes with a really significant cost. The technical term for it, and this is a term everyone needs to learn, is the switch cost effect. When you switch between tasks, it comes with a cost. You remember less of what you do, you make more mistakes, you're much less creative. And I remember when I first learned that, thinking, okay, I can see there's some truth in that, but this is a small effect, right? This is not like a big effect. Hewlett-Packard, the printer company, got a scientist in to study their workers, and he split them into 2 groups. And the first group was told, get on with your task, whatever it is, you're not going to be interrupted. And the second group was told, get on with your task, whatever it is, but at the same time, you've got to answer a heavy load of email and phone calls. So pretty much how most of us live. And at the end of it, the scientists involved tested the IQ of both groups. The group that had not been interrupted scored on average 10 IQ points higher. But you begin to see why Professor Miller said to me, we are living in a perfect storm of cognitive degradation as a result of being constantly interrupted.
In your book, you mentioned you imagine a new kind of society. I think you call it a focus-friendly society. Can you tell us a little bit like what that would look like and how can we start?
There's scientific evidence for 12 factors that are undermining our attention, which actually range very widely. Some of them are in our technology, obviously, but actually there are a whole broad range of things. The food we eat is really negatively affecting our attention. The sleep we increasingly don't get is negatively affecting our attention. The way our offices are designed, the way our kids' schools are designed, there's a big range of factors. So to get our attention back, the first thing we need to do is to understand what is happening to us, to really get a deep knowledge of the science. And then one by one, we need to tackle these factors to reclaim our minds. The good news is, because it's very easy to get into a way of thinking where you just think, oh, okay, my attention isn't as good as it was, but the modern world has just changed. This is the way the world has to be. There's nothing we can do about it. I just have to cope as best I can. I'm here to tell you that these are very recent changes. They are the result of small numbers of people who've made these decisions to profit themselves. It is not inevitable. It is not an inherent part of the modern world. We can have all the benefits of modernity without these huge costs to our attention. I've been to the places that have begun to make that transition, that it's happening in many different parts of the world. So this should be a really empowering time. I slightly jokingly say what we need is an attention rebellion, right? We need to decide, do we value attention?
Yep.
Do we want to be able to think deeply? Do we want our children to be able to read books and play outside? If we want that, we can get it, but we have to fight for it. And it's even more important that we fight for it now, at this moment when AI is beginning to transform so much. Because I have to tell you, the shallow, easy stuff, which you can do when your attention has atrophied, is all going to be done much better than AI pretty soon. The value we can provide as human beings is depth, deep thought and creativity.
Yep.
And those are the things that require attention. They're the very things we're losing. So now, if we want to have sustainable employment, if we want to be able to get through this AI revolution in ways that are compatible with humans having good lives, we absolutely have to reconnect with what are our superpowers, what are our deeper capacities, and we can do that.